Zoink Scoop, where are we? Zoink Scoop, where are we? We must be in the teleportation labyrinth. It's all blue. In the anime, it's not blue. The joke doesn't really work, but to me, it's got a nice blue hue to it. Anyway, we're here talking about the teleportation labyrinth and the monsters that lie within it. So it seems like a few of you liked the last one that I did, and so here we are with the monsters of the teleportation labyrinth. So I'll just be going over all the monsters that you'll be finding within the teleportation labyrinth, because I don't imagine the anime will skip any, and I don't want to get into that conversation again because even the author got involved. It's not just the English audience that weren't too happy with the latest episode. It was apparently the Japanese audience, which actually surprises me a whole lot. But that's not important. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I made a video the other week, I guess, talking about skip content, which is something that I do, but not in the most happy kind of situation. But that, again, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to talk about the monsters, blah, 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 blah. And so let's start with the monsters going from the first floor and then making our way down to the 7th floor, one at a time. And so the first one that you'll find in the teleportation labyrinth is the B-ranked Tarantula Death Lord. These Tarantula Death Lords are not actually tarantulas, oddly enough. They do shoot webs, and so that's technically, they're technically spiders. They're not tarantulas, but they are very large poisonous spiders, and the poison can be cured by using just simple elementary detoxification magic. Nothing really insane is needed. They are pretty much fodder. They'll just, we even see them just get slain down pretty much instantly. They're not really that strong, but they are kind of strong in numbers. And although they can be found pretty much anywhere between the first, second, and third floors, they primarily are found within the first floor itself, and they pretty much just take up all of it. Just everywhere you look, you will find a Tarantula Death Lord. And although you will see a lot of them, they are all much younger and smaller compared to the ones that you'll find in later floors. And the trade-off is the later floors you go, the less you'll see of them, but the bigger and more dangerous they are. And so it's kind of it's one of those situations of would you want to fight a horse-sized spider or 100 spider-sized horses? That's kind of the situation here in a way, but not really at all. But pretty much the main feat that they have is that they kind of target those who have arachnophobia, and then by creating empty spaces within the ground, they'll kind of lead you in a certain part of the dungeon floor that they want you to go to, and then when you're there, you'll kind of just get surprised by a trap. They are somewhat intelligent creatures, by actually explaining it like that, because they lead you around. They know your fear, and so you're obviously going to avoid the spaces where they're not at, or where they are at. And then you'll go to the spaces where they're not at, and so they'll create a pathway for you, essentially going straight to a trap, where you'll just be teleported somewhere else in the dungeon and probably just murdered. And so honestly, despite they're they're a spider, they're not entirely dumb, and a lot of these monsters here are kind of intelligent. But let's move on to the next monster that you will find starting on the 2nd floor and then on the 3rd floor as well, the B-ranked Iron Crawler. Iron crawlers are pretty much just caterpillar monsters with a tough kind of shell around them, and they are very big and kind of just heavy. They almost resemble a mini tank, and they look very similar to Omu from Nausicaa. And I'm not too familiar with what this movie is, but it does star Shia LaBeouf, so it's gonna be a great movie in my eyes. And these things are so tough that not even Paul, who is pretty much a Saint tier swordsman, he's advanced in all 3 kind of stages, and so that kind of, I would say he could fight a Saint tier. He can't even defeat them in a single strike. They are only B rank, but they have insane defenses. And it was stated that when Roxy isn't around in the group, it is very difficult for them to fight and defeat these things. Swordsmen are not a good match against the Iron Crawlers, not at all really. And that does mean that magicians are just better suited to fight these things, mainly because their main weakness is fire. However, because you're in a cave, you can't really use fire in a cave because it'll just deplete all the oxygen, which the characters think that it's some kind of incurable poisoning, but in reality it's just there's no more oxygen. You can't breathe anymore. And so these monsters, like I said, they're all kind of intelligent. They all kind of have formations, and they'll change depending on the floor and depending on what monsters are involved. And so between mainly the second floor. We'll get to the third floor and beyond in a bit, but on the second floor, what they'll do, the main formation is the iron crawlers would charge ahead while the tarantulas would pin you down with their webs, and they'll kind of just, I guess, run you over like a tank. And so yeah, they do work together. All these monsters work really well together, and it kind of makes sense since they were kind of all born within the labyrinth itself, I assume. And so I guess it makes sense that they naturally would end up working together in interesting ways. But moving on to the third floor, and we are here, from here on is nothing but at least A rank monsters. We have the Mud Skull, who appears from the third and fourth floors. Mud Skulls are pretty much just giant mud monsters, and they often have a skull in the middle of their chest, a human-looking skull, which I assume they stole, but I don't know. They're about 2.5 meters tall, which is kind of tall, and they're just big old thick boys. They're just massive chonkers. I didn't like how that sounded. Am I overexposed? I think I'm very white here. And so these things, similar to the caterpillars, aren't insanely fast, but they are also very, very tough because it's just the mud will absorb the attack. The mud isn't their skin, it's just covering them. And so what's worse is the skull that you can see in their chest is what essentially it is their skull, right? The mud's the outer layer, the skull is pretty much them. If you destroy the skull, you beat the monster. However, they can kind of just go, whoop. The skull just moves. It'll just move, or it'll go within itself, and so if you don't have a sharp enough sword, you'll just like bang off of it, and there's nothing you can do about it. The skull is deep within. It's not going to pop it out, because once it senses danger, it'll just suck the skull back inside of itself, and it's pretty much immune to most attacks. It's pretty difficult, and on top of that, they have magic. So they'll either just like get a glob of mud in their hand and just whip it at you, or they will use spells very similar to Stone Cannon. And so it's like, they're kind of formidable. They are A rank for a reason. If you do not have like an insanely strong guy or a magician to just explode them, it's going to be very difficult to actually beat these guys. And despite them being very simple looking golems, again, they're very intelligent. These things act pretty much as like commanders to the rest of the monsters, and so they'll command lesser monsters like the Tarantula Deathlords or Iron Crawlers, and they would attack in a formation with the Iron Crawlers on the vanguard, Deathlord Tarantulas in the middle, and themselves at the rear. And yeah, pretty much just a general. And like once it's at the back, it'll keep slinging mud at you, while again it'll be a similar formation with the second and first, I guess the second floor with the Tarantulas and the Crawlers, where they'll just pin you down. The tarantulas will pin you down, and the crawlers will just run over you. Plus, with the added on like aerial attacks from behind, well, very difficult to beat. I don't know what you're gonna do. However, because they are pretty much just made out of mud, there's not really much that they can do against fire or like water, because if you burn them, they'll just harden and they can't move anymore. And if they're, you spray with water, they'll just melt. And from the sounds of things, like I said, they're like, it is just straight up mud, right? It is mud on them, but also they are the skull pretty much, but they're almost like haunting this like mud body of theirs. It's very difficult to say because we don't know if they have like a skeleton or not, but it seems like that they have a ghostly skull that they are like haunting this mud. And so if you destroy the mud, they're essentially just a skeleton skull head, and they're not gonna be able to do anything. And so although technically the mud isn't a part of their body, it is their body. I don't think that they would feel any attacks to it, but it's, if you get rid of the body, what are they gonna do? But their last weakness is something that I said before, and so all you'd have to do, you don't even need water or fire. If you're able to just get a sneak attack, just go with a stone cannon and then just break the skull, and you're good and done, right? Simple job, walk away and go have a break. But what if we added another monster to the mix? So now we're on floor 4, and now that means that the tarantulas, the crawlers, the iron crawlers, they are gone. It is nothing but mud skulls and the armored warrior on floor 4. That might not sound too dangerous. Okay, now you can just focus on the mud skulls. You can focus on whatever the hell the armored warrior is. But these guys are pretty strong. They are haunted suits of armor with 4 arms, and they got a bunch of swords. And they just, because they're a ghost, they're going to be very difficult to take down, right? The Mud Skull, I do think, it's my own headcanon, it is some kind of ghost. And so using some kind of divine strike magic, it probably would kill it, but at the same time, you can just blow its skull up and then you're good to go. That is one of the two ways to deal with haunted or like skeletal kind of undead creatures. If you just blow them up, they're good to go, right? You win pretty much. You won't technically kill them, but they'll essentially be immobile and they'll just be kind of little bone pieces scattered across the ground. And so that's how you could defeat the Mud Skull. It just won't be able to exist properly anymore. But there's also the Divine Strike. And so it's very similar with the Armored Warrior here. If you just destroy the armor, it's not going to be able to move it. And so it's just a bunch of armored scrap on the ground, nothing it can do. But also you have to use the Divine Strike to properly kill them. If you don't have any kind of warrior that is able to use Divine Strike, then you would be kind of limited to just physically destroying the armor. However, they have Water God style moves to counter any of your attacks. So, not just physical either, magic as well. I don't think that you can physically counter Divine Strike magic. It seems to be kind of more of like a beam or an energy whoosh of some kind. That's kind of the general idea of those magic, like that magic style. I don't think it's physical, like, you know, stone cannon or anything, but this thing can deflect any kind of like sword attack that comes its way or any physical attack. You're not going to hit it. This is why it's an A rank. It's A rank for a reason. Because it's a dude, pretty much, an immortal guy who is really good at using the Water God style. And the Water God style is very powerful if you don't know how to combat it. And even if you do know how to combat it, you're on the defense. Because they're on the defense. Because you can't go on the offense. But you don't know what they're going to do when they're on the offense. It's very difficult. But moving on to the second last monster found within the Teleportation Labyrinth, there's not too many. It is the A-ranked monster, the Devouring Devil. They can be found on the 5th and 6th floors. And these things are pretty much a bunch of like rakes. What's that one skinwalker? Are they called skinwalkers? What are the weird lanky kind of creepy creatures that all the kids are talking about nowadays? I think they're skinwalkers, I want to say, but it kind of looks like a rake in a way. Not a gardening tool, but do you remember that old creepypasta rake thing? It's just like a bald little gremlin guy hunched over in your yard. That's kind of what they look like, but they got like extremely long arms, a gaping mouth, and the image that I have does not really depict it properly, but it's still absolutely terrifying and I hate looking at it. But these things with their giant long claws will just crawl all around the walls and the ceiling, and they will hide up there. And you're just screwed because they'll just jump down and attack you and just murder you and eat your literal face off. And why not? Okay, you might be thinking, why don't you just look at the ceilings? Oh, hey, there's one. There we go. And then you can just shoot it away and then kill it. That's true. But who's looking at the ground? There's no monsters down there, but there are many, many traps. Teleportation traps, mainly. And so while you're focused above, you're not going to be focused down below, and then you'll just get teleported to another random part of the dungeon. Or if you're only focusing on the traps, you're just going to get jumped. Pretty much. And so these things are very fast, very strong, but pretty much zero defense. They're essentially a glass cannon. If you are able to manage to find one, just slice it up if you can hit it, and it's pretty much as dead. They are very weak creatures. They're strong, but they're weak. And these things, though, we know how they're born. They are born from eggs, and it's very strange. They're a dark, oblong-shaped and coated in liquid, resembling cockroach eggs. And no, I'm not going to show an image of the cockroach eggs. And so the thing is, these things are very strong, they're very fast, but they're pretty weak when it comes to their defenses. However, they have very kind of unpredictable movements, oddly enough. And for some reason in the book, it says, well, because they have very unpredictable movements, that makes them a very weak A-ranked monster. And that means that the monsters like the Armored Warrior are stronger. I don't know how that makes any sense at all, but I just thought that I'd let you know about that, because for some reason having unpredictable movement is a sign of weakness. I think that might be a mistranslation, I don't know. Or maybe I'm just stupid and misunderstood. However, much like a lot of these other monsters here, they do have a glaring weakness. That is, if you burn the roots of a talfro tree, almost like it's incense, I almost said the other word, then it'll kind of just, like, they absolutely despise the spell. But because the incense, I guess the smoke would rise to the ceiling, they will literally just jump down, stay off of the ceiling, and crawl on the floors, making them a pretty easy target for anybody to attack. And so they really did, I guess, their personality, if we were to give them a personality, they were very much like cockroaches, and their nests were kind of more like a pest rather than a monster. These things are just essentially humanoid cockroaches that are kind of easy to kill. So I don't know how they're like cockroaches, but I guess they're very humanoid bug-like in a way. I don't know about physically because we haven't seen them yet, but like in the anime, but yeah, I guess they're very cockroach-esque. And so, what about the 6th floor? I said that there were 7, right? These guys are on the 5th and 6th floor, so what other monster will we encounter on the 6th floor? Well, none, actually. It's kind of almost a calm before the storm, and we are talking about an A-ranked monster here, so it's very weird how that is the calm before the storm, but it really is, because again, once you know their patterns, their kind of unpredictable patterns, they do become pretty easy targets. Once you know their weakness, just light up some incense, and then they'll just drop to the floor, and then you just kill them pretty easily. They are, like it said, they're more of a pest at that point. But that leads us to the final floor. Floor 7, with the only S-ranked monster that you can find in the Teleportation Labyrinth, the Monotite Hydra. So, fair warning, this is a pretty big, I guess, monster in the series. If you want to wait for the anime to cover it, you know, watch the anime in a few weeks, you'll be able to see the fight and everything. I'm not going to go into details of the fight and the events that unfold, but I will talk about the Hydra itself. So, if you wanted to, come back in a few weeks, because I'm sure the anime will leave out some details, and that's not that's not a jab at it, it's just that's what it'll do. That's not a bad thing. And come back and you can see the full, like, actual description of what this Manatite Hydra is and can do, and the history behind it, because I don't know what will be included in the anime. Or if you don't want to wait like almost a month, I'm right here, baby. The Monotite Hydra is the guardian of the Teleportation Labyrinth. It is a 9-headed dragon, approximately twice the size of a red worm, and we've already seen the size of a red worm in the anime. It is pretty massive. It's already like almost twice the height of an actual person, maybe 1.5. Like, maybe, well, I guess it'd probably be about, what, 10 feet tall, 8 feet-ish, give or take. They're pretty tall. And this thing is just double that, which in the anime it also seems like that it is much bigger than that. So it's probably up to about 20 feet tall at the bare minimum, I'm going to say. And so its body is covered, and when I say covered, I mean fully covered, head to toe, in the eyes, probably in the mouth, maybe not in the mouth actually, but literally over the eyes. It is made of like crystal. Essentially, it has very sharpened emerald green scales that can absorb and nullify magic attacks and cut the victim's body upon contact. Literally, if you were to take a scale in your hand and just lightly run your finger through it, it will be cut, maybe even just in half. If you were to just go a little swipe like that, they're very sharp. Like, you could probably make a sword out of it. That would be very interesting, but I don't know if you'd even be able to grind it and, like, shape it into a sword. So it might just, you'd kind of just have to duct tape all the scales on top of a sword, and you have one of the world's sharpest swords, I'm sure. I could see that working. And this thing, being a Hydra, is capable of regeneration. If one of its heads come off, then it'll just regrow within a few moments. It has insane, like, regeneration, even compared to some other people who can regenerate, like Batagati. I don't think that this thing's regeneration is as good as Batagati's, but it still is really good. However, one weakness that it has, and I wonder if you can apply it to immortal demon kings like Batagati, is fire. If you were to cut off its head and then immediately burn it, it won't be able to regrow. And so again, I wonder if that would work with Batagati. If you were to cut off one of his arms, kind of burn the wound, it might not, like, regrow. I wonder. Someone should test that out somehow. I don't know. It's a fake, it's an anime, but I don't care. Someone's got to test that out in real life. We got to, like, Mythbusters this. Imagine a Mythbusters for, like, anime though. So, I don't know how that would work. I don't know beyond the premise there, but it just, Imagine it. And so each of its heads are capable of attacking independently, and they're able to unleash a powerful fire breath. However, it's kind of like a last resort. It's almost like the super attack that it'll use, the fire breath. And this fire breath is insanely strong and will literally just melt steel within just half a second. It blows you hard, his breath hard, blows the breath hard on you, the fire breath, and you'll just melt away pretty much. You will literally just go out of existence. It will melt you, it will just obliterate you and evaporate you to smithereens. Literally evaporate you. And so it is able to fire its breath from multiple heads at once. It would take nearly 10 very powerful magicians to defend against this thing's breath. And what, don't we see in the trailer or in the opening, like, Alina is just, like, tanking it with her shield, which really goes to show how powerful her shield is. It is a very powerful shield. Her shield and Paul's sword, very powerful weapons, and we'll learn more about them when the anime shows us. However, like I said, this is kind of like almost a final weapon to the dragon. It does have some kind of cooldown period, however, we don't know how it works. Either it's like it has mana and it'll just like deplete itself of mana, then it has to regenerate, or it might be some kind of biological thing. It might not be related to magic at all, which is equally terrifying, I think. Even more terrifying, actually. Because I guess I've always assumed in terms of Mushoku Tensei, a dragon, you know, a red worm would fire, like, its breath fire via magic. Not just, hey, it's got like a little fire gland in the back of its throat to go poof. That's a little terrifying. But upon first glance, it seems like that this Hydra can only move about 4 heads at a time. But that is either just a ploy to let your guard down, or if it's pushed back enough, it's like, alright, I'll show you my final form of using more of my heads. I don't know. And so it is possible that, like the other monsters in this dungeon, it is smart enough to, like, make it itself appear weaker than it actually is to let people's guard down so it can kill them easier. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past it. And there is some proof of this because it will change its attack patterns quite regularly, almost like a boss, right? This would be a very good boss. If we made an actual dungeon crawler of the Teleportation Labyrinth through this Hydra at the end of it, it would literally have different phases and changes within its, like, the boss battle. Once you deplete one of its health bars, it'll change its attack pattern. That's literally what it does multiple times. And so it is possible that it's either just retreating to think, oh god, I'm getting pushed back, I have to do something else, or it's smart enough to be like, okay, I'm testing the waters here a bit. So it's hard to say if it's intelligent or just acting on instinct, but given the track record of the other monsters within the labyrinth, I wouldn't put it past it that it's just smart. Like, sometimes it'll, like, retreat and kind of cower away only to secretly, like, regenerate one of its heads. There's another time it's able to use one of its decapitated heads as, like, a whip. And, like, literally just oh, that didn't feel good. And again, other times it'll just use more heads than it has been, like, throughout the remainder of the fight or the rest of the fight. And so it's very interesting. It's got to be intelligent to some degree. And so to defeat the monster, what you do is, you guessed it, just kill off, like, cut off all the heads, burn the wounds up so it can't heal, and so then it'll just actually be dead. And then you got a dead Hydra on your hands. Let's go! It'll be simple and easy. And so now some facts of the Hydra, which I don't know if the anime will ever get into. A lot of what I talked about before probably will be shown in some way, maybe not just in as much detail, but the history of the Hydra, I wouldn't be surprised if it skips out, because again, it's not one of those important things. But the last recorded encounter of a monetite Hydra was dated back to the Second Great Human Demon War. For, you know, just a refresher, there have been, I believe, 3 Great Human Demon Wars. The latest one was about 400 to, you know, I don't know, I forget how long the war was, but it ended about 400 years ago, and that was the Laplace War. And then there was a big gap between that one and the Second War. And so this is probably at least 1,000 or a few thousand years old. This is the last recorded time that anyone has ever seen one of these things. And the species was said to be annihilated by the explosion that caused and created the Ringus Sea. So yeah, there's a lot of like natural formations in Mushoku Tensei that just aren't natural. Like remember the Holy Sword Highway? Again, I think the anime even got into it where Saint Millis, like the OG, whoever he is, I'll probably make a video talking about him at some point. He just did a slash in one slash, which I think he was killing or attacking Batagati or something. I think he killed some powerful person in this slash. I forget who. It might have been a Kalman. I don't remember too well. But it literally just split mountains in half, and like half of the continent is now just open up. And so some other attack, again, it might be by St. Mills, it could have been an old Kalman or maybe a dragon of some kind. It destroyed and created the Ringus Sea. I do forget, I think we know who, but I forget who did it. But literally, that giant ring in the middle of the map, that's not natural. That's not supposed to be. It was land once. And so if you were to harvest the magic stone scales that the dragon has or the Hydra has on it, it will still work, right? The scales themselves like retain mana somehow. I don't know if it's an infinite supply. Maybe that is like, maybe they regenerate mana on their own. I'm not too sure, but they still retain their like magic nullification ability. So if you, again, make a sword out of it, make some armor, literal dragon scale armor out of it, and then you are good to go. You are immune to all kinds of like magic attack. It's insane. But one thing to note about the scales, I believe, I don't have this in my notes, but from what I remember, when you attack the magic scales with like any kind of magic, it'll make this like loud screeching, almost like nails on a chalkboard, just like screech that just echoes and bellows throughout, and it's not a pleasant noise, and so you're going to want to cover your ears with it. And so it's like, maybe it wouldn't make for some great armor, because like if you get attacked in the head by magic, yeah, you'll be fine, but you're gonna be deaf. You're absolutely not gonna, your hearing's gonna be messed up somehow after that. But what's interesting is hydras don't live in packs and are native to the demon continent, yet here it is literally on the other side of the world in the Begart continent. It is the teleportation labyrinth, so maybe it got teleported in there? I don't know. But these hydras primarily come in 3 colors: white, gray, and gold. However, there's supposedly no such thing as a hydra with green scales. This Mountatite Hydra is seen more as like a fairy tale monster than anything real, and most people don't really think that it ever exists, right? It's the ye old green scaled Hydra. It's almost like Moby Dick in a way, right? Was Moby Dick real? I don't even know, right? It's like the Kraken and all that, right? It's just a fairy tale. It's nothing real. Just like the Norwegians, right? They don't actually exist. I don't know why I chose the Norwegians, but this thing is so rare. Again, the Mountatite Hydra that was found in the Human Demon War, the second one, wasn't a green one. It was just a Hydra, right? It was a Mountatite Hydra. It wasn't a green one either. It was a gold, gray, or a white one. So this green one, who knows when it's ever been seen? Obviously, it's seen more as a fairy tale, so there must be some kind of recorded history of it. But again, it's just very, very rare. It's old. It's probably before the first Human Demon War, maybe. And its legend has been passed throughout time. I don't know. Or maybe it's one of those cases of like, it's been thought of so much that it's your collective consciousness brought it into existence. I've heard stories of that, right? Not related to Mushoku Tensei, but just other, usually they're paranormal ghost stories. Japan usually, I think more so than Western horror, Japan really likes that kind of trope of you imagining something brings it to life. That's kind of I think the concept of a lot of yokai is the idea of something manifesting. And so I wouldn't be surprised, given, the author's Japanese, I wouldn't be surprised if he took some Japanese inspiration with the Mountatite Hydra, and it's a case where people thought like, oh, is that a green Hydra? Nah, no way. And it's like a gold, it's like the dress, right? The black and blue or the white and gold dress, but it's like they see the gold and they think it's green. It's like, that's a green Hydra, but it never actually existed. And then like thousands of years later, the legends and tales have gone by, and then it physically was brought into existence because of the legend and lore behind it. That's a lot of headcanon, but I love the idea. And that is the last monster that you will find in the Teleportation Labyrinth. And so I'm glad that you joined me on this journey. And I don't know what the next journey will be, but I'm scared of the next few episodes. And so let me know what other videos you want to see down in the comments below. What is your favorite monster in the Labyrinth? Personally, I love the Devouring Devils. They're just so creepy. The Armored Warriors are also really cool too. The others are okay. The Hydra's obviously awesome, but I love the Armored Warrior and the Devouring Devil the most myself. They're just badass and absolutely creepy. And so, again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you did, and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.